she declared. My body, my choice, our no kids deal means nothing. I nodded once, then canceled our wedding plans that same night. Some decisions reshape your entire future in a single moment, and this was one of them. I'm a 30-year-old software architect living in Austin, pulling in around $95,000 designing enterprise systems for tech companies that most people have never heard of but use every day. My life runs on structure, careful planning, and clear boundaries, habits forged during my chaotic childhood in a house with 6 siblings where privacy was non-existent and personal space was a luxury I dreamed about. Growing up watching my parents struggle financially and emotionally with constant diaper changes, sleepless nights, and the relentless demands of raising 7 kids convinced me early on that parenthood wasn't for me. I'd seen firsthand how children could drain bank accounts, destroy relationships, and turn responsible adults into exhausted zombies stumbling through their days on 3 hours of sleep and pure caffeine. My parents loved us, but they were overwhelmed constantly, always stressed about money, always too tired for meaningful conversations, always putting their own needs last until they forgot they had any needs at all. I watched my mother cry quietly in the kitchen more times than I can count, and my father work 3 jobs just to keep us fed and housed. That life looked like hell to me, and I swore I'd never repeat their mistakes. I met Olivia 2.5 years ago at a wine tasting event my college roommate Marcus hosted at his upscale downtown loft. She was this stunning 27-year-old pharmaceutical sales rep with auburn hair and green eyes, wearing a navy dress that suggested both professionalism and confidence without trying too hard to impress anyone. I noticed her immediately because while everyone else was pretending to understand the sommelier's pompous lecture about tannins and terroir, she was rolling her eyes and whispering sarcastic comments to herself about people who took wine this seriously. I'm pretty sure he just made up the word mouthfeel, she said when I approached her table, gesturing toward the pretentious expert who was explaining in excruciating detail why this particular Bordeaux was worth $150 a bottle. Either that, or I've been drinking wine wrong my entire adult life, which would be deeply embarrassing considering how much I've consumed. I laughed, genuinely charmed by her irreverence in a room full of people desperately trying to sound sophisticated. I was thinking the same thing. I'm Jake, and I drink wine specifically because it gets me relaxed and pairs well with pizza, not because I want to taste hints of blackberry and tobacco that may or may not exist. Finally, someone honest, she said, extending her hand with a grin that lit up her entire face. I'm Olivia, and I'm only here because Marcus promised there'd be enough free alcohol to make professional networking bearable. So far, he's delivered on that promise. Our conversation flowed naturally from wine snobbery to work frustrations to travel stories, and I was impressed by her sharp intelligence and genuine ambition. She'd worked her way up from an entry-level position making $32,000 to managing major pharmaceutical accounts across 3 states, traveling constantly and building a career she was genuinely passionate about rather than just tolerating for a paycheck. More importantly, when the topic of kids inevitably came up, as it always does with people our age at social gatherings, she laughed and said, "My biological clock must be broken because all I hear when people talk about babies is the sound of money being flushed down the toilet and my freedom disappearing forever." I nearly choked on my Pinot Noir, setting the glass down with surprise. "You're serious about that?" "Dead serious," she said, her expression shifting to something more earnest and genuine. "I've never understood the appeal of giving up everything you've worked for to change diapers and attend PDA meetings. I like my sleep, my disposable income, and my ability to hop on a plane to Barcelona on a whim without needing to arrange childcare or worry about college funds." That moment felt like finding someone who spoke my exact language, someone who understood that choosing to remain child-free wasn't selfish or immature. It was a valid life choice that allowed for different kinds of fulfillment and happiness that most people never even considered. Over the next 18 months, our relationship deepened into something I'd never experienced before, a partnership built on genuine compatibility and shared vision for the future that felt almost too good to be true. We spent countless evenings discussing our dreams of dual income, no kids lifestyle, expensive vacations to places like New Zealand and Japan that would be impossible with children in tow, the realistic possibility of early retirement by our mid-40s through aggressive saving and investing, and the career freedom that came with not having to consider school districts or college funds when making major life decisions or job changes. Olivia moved into my downtown loft after our first anniversary, bringing her minimalist aesthetic and impressive wine collection, and we worked out a fair financial arrangement where she contributed about 40% to household expenses based on our income difference, which felt equitable and mature rather than awkward or complicated. She made around $58,000 in pharmaceutical sales with solid commission potential, so splitting everything proportionally made perfect sense and never caused tension or resentment between us like I'd seen destroy other couples. We discovered we both loved the same obscure documentaries about true crime and financial fraud, preferred cooking elaborate meals at home over dining out constantly at overpriced restaurants, and shared a mutual obsession with planning detailed itineraries for our trips months in advance, researching everything from local customs to currency exchange rates. We even started attending child-free meetup groups together twice a month, connecting with other couples who'd made the same conscious choice to prioritize their relationship and personal growth over traditional family expectations that neither of us had ever questioned before meeting like-minded people. These gatherings felt like finding our tribe, people who understood that fulfillment could come from career achievements, travel experiences, and deep partnerships rather than sleepless nights spent dealing with crying babies and endless parenting responsibilities that seemed to consume every aspect of people's identities. I remember one particularly validating evening when we attended a presentation about financial planning for child-free couples at an upscale hotel conference room, learning about investment strategies and retirement options that parents could never realistically consider because their disposable income was constantly being redirected toward education costs and family obligations that never seemed to end. "This is exactly the life I want," Olivia whispered to me during the session, squeezing my hand as the presenter showed detailed projections of what our combined net worth could look like by age 50 without the average $233,000 expense of raising a single child through age 18, not including college costs that could easily double that figure. The numbers were compelling and reinforced everything we'd already discussed about building wealth together through smart financial choices and shared goals. When my sister announced her third pregnancy at last year's family Christmas dinner, complete with ultrasound photos passed around the table like trophies, Olivia and I exchanged knowing glances across the crowded room as everyone else celebrated and offered enthusiastic congratulations that felt performative and obligatory. Later, driving home through the quiet streets while Christmas lights twinkled in windows of houses filled with families we'd never be, she shook her head thoughtfully and said, "I honestly don't understand how people can keep having kids when they're already overwhelmed with two and constantly complaining about being exhausted and broke. It seems like they're deliberately setting themselves up for more stress and less time for everything they used to enjoy before parenthood took over their entire existence." I agreed completely, feeling genuinely grateful that I'd found someone who saw these situations with the same clarity and rational thinking that I did, someone who wasn't swayed by social pressure or biological urges that seemed to override common sense in so many people our age. We even joked about getting matching tattoos representing our commitment to the child-free life, small compass designs symbolizing our freedom to go wherever our dreams took us without being anchored down by family responsibilities that would limit our options and drain our resources. Though we never actually went through with the tattoos, mainly because Olivia was terrified of needles and I wasn't entirely sold on permanently marking my body, the conversation represented how perfectly aligned we felt about our future together and how refreshing it was to plan a life that revolved entirely around our own goals and aspirations rather than accommodating the needs and schedules of hypothetical children who would completely reshape our priorities and financial possibilities. During those 18 months, I felt like I'd finally found my person. Someone who shared not just my lifestyle preferences but my fundamental values about what made life meaningful and worth living, someone who understood that happiness could be defined in ways that didn't involve traditional milestones like mortgages in suburban neighborhoods with good school ratings and minivans filled with car seats and soccer equipment. After 2 years together, I proposed during our trip to Iceland, a destination we'd chosen specifically because its rugged landscapes and adventure activities weren't exactly family-friendly, reinforcing our shared commitment to a child-free lifestyle that prioritized experiences over obligations. I'd been planning the proposal for months, researching the perfect spot near the Northern Lights viewing area where we'd have privacy and stunning natural beauty as our backdrop. The ring itself was a 1.2-carat solitaire that had cost me 3 months of careful saving, but seeing Olivia's face when I got down on one knee made every dollar worth it. What made the moment even more special was the humorous, child-free contract I presented alongside the ring, a laminated document I'd created as a joke that outlined our mutual commitment to never having children, complete with ridiculous clauses about never needing college funds, minivans, or suburban houses with white picket fences. Article 3. Neither party shall ever utter the phrase, "We need a bigger place for the kids," I read aloud as she laughed and wiped tears from her eyes. Article 7. All vacation destinations must be chosen based on adult entertainment value, not proximity to family-friendly attractions. She signed it with theatrical flourish, and we both laughed about how we'd frame it next to our wedding photos as a reminder of our priorities and commitment to the life we'd consciously chosen together. Wedding planning began immediately after we returned from Iceland, and Olivia threw herself into the process with an intensity that honestly surprised me, though I attributed it to natural excitement about planning what would hopefully be a once-in-a-lifetime event. We'd set a budget of $85,000 for a destination ceremony in Costa Rica, deliberately choosing a location that wasn't particularly child-friendly to reinforce our stance and ensure that any guests who attended would understand and respect our lifestyle choices. The resort we selected specialized in adult-only experiences, with activities like zip-lining through rainforest canopies and volcano tours that would be impossible with children in tow. Olivia created Pinterest boards with frightening efficiency, organizing ideas for everything from centerpieces to ceremony music, and spent hours on phone calls with her sister Emma, who worked as a professional wedding planner in Dallas and had volunteered to help coordinate the logistics from a distance. Emma understood our child-free philosophy and even suggested vendors who specialized in sophisticated, adult-focused celebrations rather than family-oriented events that might accidentally include kid-friendly elements we wanted to avoid. However, around the 6-month mark before our planned ceremony date, I started noticing subtle changes in Olivia's behavior that didn't quite align with the woman I'd fallen in love with. She began following mama blogger accounts on Instagram, something she'd previously mocked as performative and self-indulgent, and would scroll through endless photos of designer nurseries and perfectly staged family moments with an expression I'd never seen before, something almost wistful and dreamy. When I mentioned it casually, she brushed it off as research for understanding our target demographic, since some of her pharmaceutical clients were pediatric practices, but the explanation felt forced and didn't quite make sense given her specific job responsibilities. She also started making offhand comments about how cute various children were when we encountered them in public, comments that seemed completely out of character for someone who'd previously been indifferent at best toward other people's kids and had often complained about parents who brought children to inappropriate venues like nice restaurants or adult-focused events. The wedding planning continued with military precision, and Olivia's attention to detail was honestly impressive, even if her newfound interest in family-related social media content continued to puzzle me. She researched every aspect of our Costa Rican celebration, from the specific types of tropical flowers available for bouquets to the resort's wine selection and the optimal timing for outdoor ceremonies based on weather patterns and sunset schedules. Our guest list was carefully curated to include only people who understood and supported our lifestyle choices. Mostly child-free couples from our meetup groups, college friends who'd similarly chosen career advancement over family obligations, and relatives who wouldn't spend the entire reception asking when we planned to start having babies. We sent save-the-dates 6 months in advance, emphasizing the destination nature of the celebration and the adult-only atmosphere of both the resort and our planned activities, which included snorkeling excursions, zip-lining adventures, and late-night beach parties that definitely weren't suitable for families with young children. The responses were overwhelmingly positive, with most people expressing excitement about the opportunity to vacation in Costa Rica while celebrating our commitment to each other and the life we'd chosen to build together. Emma helped us coordinate everything from transportation logistics to restaurant reservations for our pre-wedding gatherings, and her professional expertise made the entire process feel manageable rather than overwhelming, despite the complexity of planning an international celebration for 60 guests who'd be traveling from various states across the country. I felt confident that we were creating exactly the kind of sophisticated, memorable experience that reflected our values and priorities as a couple, something that would mark the beginning of our married life together in a meaningful way that honored our commitment to remaining child-free and focused on our shared goals of travel, career success, and financial independence through smart planning and deliberate lifestyle choices that differentiated us from couples who'd chosen more traditional paths. 6 months before our wedding date, everything changed after Olivia attended her cousin Rachel's baby shower in Houston, an event she'd initially planned to skip because baby showers had always struck her as tedious celebrations of poor life choices and financial irresponsibility. Her mother had guilt-tripped her into attending, emphasizing family obligations and the importance of supporting Rachel during this special time. So Olivia reluctantly flew down for the weekend, complaining the entire time about having to pretend excitement over tiny clothes and impractical gifts that cost more than most people's monthly grocery budgets. She came home with a strange, dreamy expression I'd never seen before, carrying a small gift bag filled with leftover party favors and an unusual silence that felt completely out of character for someone who normally dissected social events with surgical precision and sarcastic commentary about people's choices and behavior. "How was the shower?" I asked, expecting her usual entertaining recap of family drama and ridiculous baby-themed games that adults were forced to play while pretending to enjoy themselves. Instead, she stared out the window for a long moment before saying, "It was actually really beautiful." Rachel looked so happy, so fulfilled. There's something about the way she glowed when she talked about becoming a mother that I'd never really noticed before. This was coming from someone who'd previously described pregnancy as 9 months of physical misery followed by 18 years of financial and emotional servitude, so her sudden change in perspective caught me completely off guard. Over the following weeks, she began dropping subtle hints about how fulfilling motherhood looked, how her cousin Rachel seemed to have found some deeper purpose and meaning that career success and travel experiences couldn't provide, and started questioning whether we'd been too hasty in our decision to remain permanently child-free without exploring what we might be missing. "Maybe we should keep our options open," she suggested during dinner one evening, her voice carefully casual in a way that suggested she'd been rehearsing this conversation. "People change and grow. What we wanted at 25 might not be what we want at 30. When I reminded her of our agreement, our financial plans, our carefully constructed life goals, and the laminated contract we'd signed as a symbol of our shared commitment, she became defensive and accused me of being rigid and controlling, claiming that mature people were allowed to evolve their perspectives as they gained new experiences and insights about life. "You're treating our relationship like a business contract instead of something organic that should be allowed to grow and change," she said, her tone shifting from casual to frustrated. "Real partnerships adapt when both people discover new things about themselves and what they want from life." The breaking point came when I discovered she'd been secretly attending new parent preparation classes at the community center downtown, sessions designed for couples who were expecting their first child and needed guidance on everything from diaper changing techniques to creating nurseries on various budget levels. I found the registration confirmation email when I borrowed her laptop to check my own email after my phone died, and seeing "Congratulations on beginning your parenting journey" in her inbox felt like discovering evidence of an affair. When I confronted her about it, she initially tried to lie, claiming it was research for a pharmaceutical client who specialized in prenatal vitamins, but eventually admitted she'd been attending just to understand what we might be missing and to see if her feelings about parenthood were genuinely changing or just temporary confusion brought on by wedding planning stress and family pressure. Even more disturbing was my discovery that she'd been secretly tracking her ovulation cycle using a fertility app on her phone, something completely contradictory to everything we'd agreed upon and discussed throughout our entire relationship, including our recent engagement conversations about maintaining our child-free lifestyle after marriage. The app showed months of detailed data about her fertile windows, basal body temperature readings, and other information that someone only tracks when they're actively trying to conceive, which felt like a complete betrayal of every conversation we'd ever had about our future together. "Why are you tracking your cycle if we're never having kids?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm despite feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet in ways I couldn't fully understand or process. "I just wanted to understand my body better," she replied, but her explanation sounded rehearsed and hollow, like she'd been preparing for this confrontation and had practiced her responses in advance. Lots of women track their cycles for health reasons that have nothing to do with trying to get pregnant. The lie was obvious and insulting, especially since the app she was using was specifically designed for couples attempting to conceive and included features like fertility predictions and optimal timing recommendations that had no other purpose besides helping people get pregnant as quickly as possible. I realized that while I'd been planning our wedding and dreaming about our child-free future together, she'd been secretly questioning everything we'd built our relationship on, attending classes that prepared her for a completely different life, and possibly even hoping for an accidental pregnancy that would force the issue and eliminate the need for honest conversations about our incompatible goals. The woman I'd proposed to in Iceland, the one who'd laughed while signing our ridiculous child-free contract, had apparently been replaced by someone who was actively researching stroller brands and reading parenting blogs while pretending to share my excitement about our upcoming destination wedding and our plans for early retirement funded by dual incomes and no dependents. It felt like discovering that the person I'd fallen in love with had been wearing a mask for months, maybe even longer, and I was finally seeing who she really was underneath the performance of agreement and compatibility that had convinced me we were perfect partners building toward the same future together. During what I expected to be a routine dinner conversation about finalizing wedding RSVPs and confirming our Costa Rican guest count, Olivia delivered a bombshell that shattered everything I thought I knew about our relationship and our shared future. We were sitting at our dining table with wedding planning materials spread between us, discussing seating arrangements and dietary restrictions for our guests, when she suddenly set down her pen and looked at me with an expression that was equal parts determination and nervousness. "Jake, I need to tell you something important," she began, her voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before, something that sounded like she was about to announce a major life decision that she'd already made without consulting me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our future, about what I really want from life, and I've realized that I want to start trying for a baby immediately after the honeymoon." The words hit me like a physical blow, and for a moment I couldn't process what she just said because it was so completely opposite to everything we discussed, planned, and agreed upon throughout our entire relationship. "What did you just say?" I asked, setting down my own pen and staring at her across the table covered with wedding invitations and vendor contracts for a celebration that suddenly felt like it was built on completely false premises. "I know this changes things," she continued, rushing through her explanation like she was afraid I'd interrupt her before she could finish. "But people grow and evolve, and the agreement we made years ago was between different versions of ourselves. I'm not the same person who was so sure about never wanting children, and you need to accept that my body and my choices are my own to make." When I calmly stated that this fundamental change in our life goals meant we needed to postpone the wedding to seriously reassess our compatibility and figure out whether we still wanted the same future, she exploded with an anger I'd rarely seen from her before. "You're being selfish and controlling," she accused, her voice rising to a level that made me worry about disturbing our neighbors. A supportive partner would be excited about this growth and change, not trying to hold me back from discovering what might make me truly happy. The argument escalated when she revealed something that felt like an even deeper betrayal than her changing stance on children. "I've already been off birth control for 2 months, she admitted during the heat of our fight, the confession delivered with defiant pride rather than shame or apology. "I was hoping we might have a happy accident that would make this whole conversation unnecessary and help you realize how much you'd actually love being a father once it became reality rather than just an abstract concept." The calculated deception behind her words was staggering. While I'd been planning our wedding and dreaming about our child-free future, she'd been actively trying to get pregnant without my knowledge or consent, essentially attempting to trap me into the exact life I'd spent years explaining I never wanted. "You've been trying to get pregnant behind my back?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper because I couldn't believe someone I loved and trusted could deceive me so completely about something so fundamental to our relationship. "I wasn't trying to deceive you," she replied, though her explanation contradicted her own admission. "I was just keeping my options open and seeing what happened naturally, which is what any woman has the right to do with her own body." The argument reached its peak when she threatened to leave me for someone who would appreciate her maternal instincts, and give her the family she now desperately wanted, as if my unwillingness to completely alter our agreed-upon life plan made me somehow deficient as a partner or future husband. Maybe I should be with someone who actually wants to grow and build something meaningful instead of staying stuck in the same selfish mindset forever, she said, her words designed to make me feel like I was the unreasonable one for expecting her to honor the commitments we'd made to each other. There are plenty of men out there who would be thrilled to have a family with me, who wouldn't see children as some kind of burden or threat to their precious freedom. The threat felt particularly cruel because she knew how much I valued loyalty and commitment, and she was essentially saying that if I didn't completely abandon my own life goals and desires, she'd find someone else who would give her what she wanted without question or discussion. Fine, I said, standing up from the table and looking at the woman I'd planned to marry in 3 months, someone who now felt like a complete stranger. If that's what you want, then maybe you should go find that person, because I'm not going to pretend to want children just to keep you happy. She stared at me with shock, clearly not expecting me to call her bluff or refuse to negotiate on something so fundamental to who I was and what I wanted from life. You don't mean that, she said, her confidence wavering for the first time during our argument. You're just upset and not thinking clearly about what you're saying or what you'd be throwing away. But I did mean it, and the clarity that came with finally acknowledging our incompatibility felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders, even though it meant losing someone I genuinely believed was my life partner and the person I'd spend the rest of my life loving and building a future with together. That night, while Olivia slept peacefully beside me, apparently believing her ultimatum would eventually work and that I'd come around to her way of thinking once I had time to process the situation, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and recognizing that our fundamental life goals had become completely incompatible in ways that couldn't be compromised or negotiated. The woman next to me was no longer the person I'd fallen in love with and proposed to. She'd become someone who was willing to deceive me about birth control, secretly attend parenting classes, and threaten to leave if I didn't abandon everything I'd told her I wanted from life since the day we met. I spent the early morning hours, starting around 4 a.m. when I gave up on sleep entirely, methodically canceling every aspect of our Costa Rican wedding while she remained unconscious beside me, completely unaware that her ultimatum had backfired in ways she'd never anticipated. I started with the venue, sending a carefully worded email to the resort explaining that due to irreconcilable differences, we needed to cancel our ceremony and forfeit our deposit, a decision that cost us $12,000 but felt necessary given the circumstances. Next came the photographer, the florist, the DJ, the transportation coordinator, and the wedding planner Emma had recommended, each cancellation requiring a separate phone call or email and resulting in additional forfeited deposits that totaled $31,000 by the time I finished. The financial loss was substantial but felt less important than the emotional cost of continuing to plan a wedding with someone who'd fundamentally deceived me about what she wanted from our marriage and our future together. I drafted a calm but firm explanation for both our families about the wedding cancellation, focusing on our incompatible life goals rather than the specific details of Olivia's deception, because I didn't want to embarrass her or create unnecessary drama during what was already going to be a difficult situation for everyone involved. The email explained that we discovered we wanted different things from life and marriage, and that rather than proceeding with a wedding that would likely end in divorce, we decided to end our engagement while we still had respect for each other and could separate amicably. When Olivia woke around 8 a.m. to find me packing her belongings into boxes I'd retrieved from our storage closet, she initially thought I was bluffing and that this was some kind of dramatic gesture designed to get her attention and make her reconsider her position about wanting children. "You can't be serious about this," she said, watching me carefully fold her clothes and place them in suitcases alongside her toiletries and personal items. "We're supposed to get married in 3 months. You're really going to throw away everything we've built together over one disagreement?" Her confidence began to crumble when she saw the printed cancellation confirmations spread across the dining table where we'd been planning seating arrangements just 12 hours earlier, official documents that proved I was completely serious about ending our engagement and that this wasn't a negotiation tactic or temporary emotional reaction. "You actually canceled our wedding?" she whispered, her face going pale as she picked up the resort cancellation and saw the forfeited deposit amount. "You threw away $31,000 rather than even try to work through this with me?" I continued packing her things without stopping, maintaining the calm, methodical approach I used at work when dealing with complex problems that required systematic solutions rather than emotional reactions. There's nothing to work through, Olivia. You want children and I don't. You've been secretly trying to get pregnant while I've been planning our child-free future. Those aren't differences we can compromise on or negotiate around. She began making desperate promises to return to our original agreement, swearing she'd been confused and overwhelmed by wedding planning stress and family pressure, that she didn't really want children and had just gotten caught up in romantic fantasies about motherhood after attending her cousin's baby shower. I was having a temporary moment of weakness, she pleaded, following me around the apartment as I gathered her remaining belongings from our shared spaces. Every woman goes through this kind of phase. It doesn't mean I've actually changed my mind about our life together or what I want from our marriage. But I knew these promises weren't genuine because someone who'd been secretly attending parenting classes, tracking ovulation cycles, and trying to get pregnant without consent hadn't just been having a momentary lapse in judgment. She'd been planning and preparing for a completely different life while lying to me about her true intentions and desires. If you really hadn't changed your mind, you wouldn't have been off birth control for 2 months hoping for an accident, I said, stating the obvious contradiction in her desperate attempt to convince me this was all just temporary confusion rather than a fundamental shift in what she wanted from life. The reality was that we'd become incompatible in ways that couldn't be fixed through discussion or compromise, and continuing to plan a wedding while pretending we still shared the same goals would have been dishonest to both of us and ultimately destructive to any possibility of maintaining respect for each other during this difficult transition. 3 months later, Olivia had moved back in with her parents in suburban Dallas and started dating someone she'd met through a single-parent support group, a recently divorced father of 2 young children who seemed perfectly suited to give her the instant family she'd decided she desperately wanted. Her social media presence transformed completely during this period, shifting from the sophisticated career-focused content she'd previously posted to endless photos of herself playing stepmother with captions about finding her true calling and finally understanding what real love and purpose feel like. The speed of this transformation validated every decision I'd made about ending our engagement, because it proved that her desire for children hadn't been a temporary phase or wedding-related stress, but a genuine fundamental change in her life priorities that would have made our marriage unsustainable regardless of how much we'd once cared about each other. My friends initially thought I was crazy for walking away from what they considered a perfect relationship with someone as attractive and successful as Olivia, but they gradually came to understand that fundamental incompatibility on major life decisions isn't something love can overcome, no matter how strong the attraction or how well 2 people get along in other areas of their lives. Marcus, who'd introduced us at that wine tasting 3 years earlier, admitted he'd been wrong to question my decision after seeing how quickly Olivia had moved on and embraced a completely different lifestyle than the one we'd planned together. "I thought you were being too rigid about the kids thing," he said during one of our regular coffee meetings. But watching her Instagram posts, it's obvious she would never have been satisfied with the child-free life you actually wanted, and trying to force that compromise would have destroyed both of you eventually. I began dating Claire about 6 months after the breakup, meeting her through a rock climbing group I'd joined to fill the time I'd previously spent on wedding planning and relationship maintenance. Claire was a 29-year-old veterinary surgeon who'd gotten sterilized at 25 because she was absolutely certain she never wanted children, a decision that required her to fight with multiple doctors who'd tried to talk her out of the procedure because of her age and single status at the time. Our first conversation about life goals felt refreshingly straightforward and honest, with none of the ambiguity or potential for future changes that had ultimately destroyed my relationship with Olivia. "I chose this career because I love animals, but I have zero interest in human children," she told me during our 3rd date. I've never had even a moment of doubt about that decision, and I think people who aren't completely sure shouldn't have kids because children deserve parents who actually want them. Dating someone whose goals truly aligned with mine felt like breathing freely after holding my breath for years, and I realized how much energy I'd been spending trying to convince myself that Olivia's occasional hints about changing her mind were just theoretical rather than genuine shifts in her fundamental desires. Claire and I shared the same excitement about travel opportunities, career advancement possibilities, and financial freedom that came with choosing to remain permanently child-free, and our conversations about the future felt collaborative rather than like negotiations between people who wanted different things but were hoping love would somehow bridge the gap. The story concluded perfectly 8 months after my broken engagement when Olivia announced her wedding to her new partner on social media, posting photos of herself visibly pregnant in a maternity wedding dress that couldn't hide her obvious baby bump, complete with captions about finally living her authentic truth and building the family she was meant to have. The timeline was revealing. She'd gotten pregnant within months of meeting someone new, proving that her desire for children had been genuine and urgent rather than just temporary confusion or wedding-related anxiety as she tried to convince me during our final argument. Her wedding photos showed her glowing with happiness while surrounded by her soon-to-be stepchildren, and honestly, I felt nothing but relief seeing visual confirmation that I'd made the right decision by trusting her actions over her desperate last-minute promises to return to our child-free agreement. Claire and I were planning our own engagement by that point, discussing a simple ceremony that would reflect our actual values and priorities rather than serving as some kind of performance or statement about who we thought we should be. "Thank goodness you didn't marry her," Claire said when I showed her Olivia's wedding announcement. "Imagine if you'd gone through with it and then discovered she'd been lying about wanting kids. You'd be divorced within 2 years, probably paying child support for a kid you never wanted." She was absolutely right, and seeing Olivia's obvious happiness with her new family confirmed that our breakup had been the best possible outcome for everyone involved. She got the husband and instant family she'd decided she needed, and I got to build a life with someone who genuinely shared my goals instead of just pretending to agree while secretly planning something completely different. The $31,000 in forfeited wedding deposits had been the best money I'd ever spent, because it had saved me from years of marriage to someone who'd fundamentally deceived me about what she wanted from life and who would have continued that deception until it became impossible to maintain.